The sunlight, warm and golden, spilled through the freshly cleaned windows of Ellie's sweet corner. At 62, after 35 years of pushing papers in the bustling school office, I was finally doing it. My lifelong dream, a small bakery filled with the scent of cinnamon and sugar, was real. My hands, slightly arthritic but still steady, trembled with a mixture of excitement and disbelief as I carefully hung the hand-painted wooden sign above the door. It was a simple piece, crafted by a local artist, depicting a whimsical cupcake with a smiling face. A part of me still couldn't believe this was happening, that the little girl who baked mud pies in her grandmother's garden had grown into a woman who owned her own sweet shop. The aroma of freshly baked goods, lemon bars, apple tarts, and a batch of my famous chocolate chip cookies wafted gently through the air, a fragrant promise of the treats inside. I smoothed down my apron, a cheerful floral print I'd chosen just for this occasion, and took a deep, fortifying breath. The world outside felt vibrant, full of possibility. Then the bell above the door chimed, and my daughter, Chloe Vance Sterling, stepped in, her designer handbag clutched tight. Beside her, Julian Sterling, my son-in-law, followed, his expression already set in that familiar, condescending frown. The golden light seemed to dim, and the warmth in the room evaporated, replaced by an immediate, palpable chill. My smile, which had been so wide and genuine just moments before, faltered. "Mom," Chloe began, her voice sharp, cutting through the pleasant silence. She looked around the cozy space, her eyes scanning over the display cases and the small, brightly painted tables, not with admiration, but with a critical, almost disgusted air. "Just stop with this whole charade already." My heart lurched. Charade? This was my dream, my life's work in progress. I wanted to explain, to tell her how much this meant, but the words caught my throat. Julian snorted, a harsh, dismissive sound that grated on my nerves. "Honestly, Ellie," he said, shaking his head, "a woman your age playing bakery, it's just embarrassing." He emphasized the word playing, as if to belittle every ounce of effort and every penny I had poured into this venture. I felt a flush creep up my neck. Embarrassing? I'd put my savings, my energy, my very soul into this place. "This isn't a game, Julian," I managed, my voice a little shakier than I would have liked. "This is my business. This is what I've wanted to do my whole life." Chloe crossed her arms, her posture stiff and unyielding. "You're making a fool of yourself, Mom. And frankly, you're making a fool of us too. Do you know what everyone is saying? All the family gossip? Poor Ellie, she's lost her mind, opening a bakery at her age." Her words were like daggers, each one piercing deeper. The family gossip felt like a betrayal from every direction. "This dream has been with me for 50 years, Chloe," I said, trying to infuse my voice with the passion I felt. "Since I was 12 years old watching Grandma bake. I saved for this. I planned for this. This isn't some impulse." I gestured around the small shop, hoping they might see the love, the history, the future I saw in every detail. Julian merely shrugged. "Dreams are for young people, Ellie. You're 62. This is just sad." He delivered the word "saw" with such finality, as if it were an undeniable truth, and my spirit crumbled a little further. The hurt was a physical ache in my chest, a deep, raw wound inflicted by the very people I loved most. My own daughter, my son-in-law, standing here on the day my dream finally came true, tearing it apart with such callous indifference. My vision blurred slightly, but I refused to cry. Not in front of them, not in my shop. "I think," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "it's time for you both to leave." Chloe stared at me, her expression hardening further, as if my request was an act of defiance rather than a plea for peace. "Fine," she snapped, turning toward the door, but she paused, one hand already on the handle, and delivered a final, crushing blow. "You're the family failure, Mom. Everyone can see it. Close this place down before you embarrass yourself further." Then they were gone. The bell chimed again, marking their departure, and the silence that followed was deafening, heavy with the weight of their words. Family failure. The phrase echoed in my mind, reverberating off the newly painted walls, mingling with the sweet scent of baking, turning it sour. The rest of the day was a blur of polite smiles and hopeful anticipation, broken only by the occasional customer. One elderly lady bought a single lemon bar, praising its crumbly texture and tart sweetness. A young couple picked up a pair of chocolate chip cookies, sharing a shy glance across the counter. And a busy businessman grabbed a coffee and a muffin on his way to work. 3 items. That was it. By closing time, the sunlight had faded, casting long shadows across the empty display cases. I was utterly exhausted, not just physically from standing all day, but emotionally drained. Their words had burrowed deep, planting seeds of doubt in my fertile ground of hope. Were they right? Was I too old? Was this dream just a foolish delusion for a woman like me? I reached for one of my grandmother's perfect lemon bars, the very recipe that had inspired this whole venture. The flaky crust, the tangy lemon curd, a dusting of powdered sugar. The familiar taste was a small comfort, a fleeting moment of solace in the overwhelming silence of my almost empty shop. It tasted of memories, of love, of the innocent belief that anything was possible. Catching my reflection in the darkened glass of the display case, I saw a tired woman with shadows under her eyes, her apron slightly askew. My dream, my beautiful Ellie's Sweet Corner, felt less like a beacon of hope and more like a tomb, a silent witness to a day of crushing disappointment. Yet even as the despair threatened to consume me, a stubborn, almost defiant hope whispered from somewhere deep inside. Tomorrow, it promised. Tomorrow might be different. A shiver ran down my spine, a strange sensation that wasn't entirely due to the cool evening air. It was a feeling of something significant, an unforeseen change on the horizon, though I couldn't yet grasp its nature. All I knew was that this couldn't be the end. The 2 weeks following my grand opening had been a stark reminder of Chloe and Julian's cruel words. Ellie's Sweet Corner was struggling. There were days, far too many of them, when the bell above the door remained silent, and my display cases, once so hopefully filled, looked desolate. I started baking smaller batches, carefully calculating ingredients, trying to minimize waste. The once bright promise of my dream felt duller, tarnished by the quiet hum of the empty refrigerators and the echoing silence of the shop. Doubt, a persistent little whisper, began to creep into my thoughts, confirming what my daughter and son-in-law had so readily proclaimed. One Tuesday morning, as I meticulously frosted a tray of vanilla bean cupcakes, each swirl a small act of defiance against the encroaching despair, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Ellie's Sweet Corner, I answered, trying to inject a cheerful note into my voice. Is this Ellie Vance? A crisp professional voice inquired. My name is Victoria Shaw from Shaw Event Planning. I apologize for the late notice, but we're in a bit of a crisis. My heart, which had been performing its usual rhythmic beat, suddenly picked up pace. Yes, this is Ellie. How can I help you, Miss Shaw? Our caterer, she explained, her voice tight with urgency, had a kitchen fire this morning, completely unexpected. They won't be able to provide any desserts for our client's wedding this Saturday. We're in desperate need of a replacement, and your name came highly recommended by Mrs. Davies. She said your lemon bars are legendary. Mrs. Davies? My sweet former neighbor, who always ordered a dozen of my lemon bars for her bridge club. A small smile touched my lips. A wedding? I repeated, the word feeling enormous. This Saturday? That's just 4 days away. Precisely, Victoria confirmed, for 200 guests. We need an elegant dessert table, individual cakes, pastries, something really exquisite. My mind raced. 200 guests. My biggest order to date had been for 6 cupcakes for Mrs. Davies' grandson's birthday. This was a monumental leap, but a flicker of that stubborn hope, which refused to be extinguished, ignited within me. This could be it. This could be the chance to prove them all wrong. I can do it, I heard myself say, the words coming out stronger than I expected, despite the tremor of apprehension that ran through me. An elegant dessert table, individual cakes, pastries, I can absolutely handle that. Excellent. Victoria's relief was palpable. The venue is the Blackwell Estate. Do you know it? Blackwell Estate. My breath hitched. It was the Blackwell Estate, a sprawling property nestled in the city's most exclusive district, the kind of place where the city's elite held their most lavish events. Chloe would lose her mind if she knew. The next 4 days became a blur of tireless, focused work. I spent hours at the market, carefully selecting the finest ingredients: Madagascar vanilla, organic berries, imported Belgian chocolate. My credit card, usually reserved for modest groceries and utility bills, saw more action than it had in years. I poured every ounce of my passion and skill into each creation. Miniature wedding cakes, delicately adorned with sugar flowers and edible pearls. French macarons in pastel shades, their fragile shells giving way to chewy, flavorful centers. Rich, dark chocolate tarts, shimmering with a mirror's glaze. And of course, my grandmother's lemon bars, elevated with a touch of gold leaf, transforming them into glittering jewels. I worked through the nights, fueled by strong coffee and an unyielding determination. The sweet, comforting aromas of baking filled my little shop, chasing away the lingering doubts. Each delicate pastry, each perfectly piped swirl of frosting, was a testament to my dream, to my skill, to the quiet strength that had been lying dormant for too long. Saturday morning dawned, clear and bright. My old Honda, usually reserved for short trips to the grocery store, was packed to the brim with carefully cushioned boxes, each holding my precious cargo. A focused energy hummed within me, replacing the anxiety of the past 2 weeks. This wasn't just an order, it was a mission. At Blackwell Estate, the grandeur was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers sparkled, and the air buzzed with the excited chatter of wedding guests. I was directed to a spacious room adorned with flowers, where a long table awaited my creations. With meticulous care, I began to arrange my dessert table, transforming it into a feast for the eyes. Each miniature cake was placed just so, each macaron nestled perfectly beside its brethren. I fussed over every detail, ensuring the display was not just beautiful, but perfect. As I stepped back to admire my handiwork, a deep, resonant voice broke my concentration. "Exceptional work, my dear." I turned to see a distinguished man impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, a kind smile gracing his lips. He had an aura of quiet authority. This was Richard Hawthorne, the groom's father. My heart fluttered nervously. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne," I replied, a blush rising to my cheeks. He approached the table, his eyes twinkling with appreciation. He selected a miniature wedding cake, taking a small, thoughtful bite. His eyes widened slightly. "Remarkable," he murmured, before reaching for one of the gold-leafed lemon bars. He took a bite, and a look of pure delight spread across his face. "Extraordinary. This is truly something special. I must ask, where did you train? What culinary institute produced such artistry?" I beamed, my chest swelling with a pride I hadn't felt in a long, long time. "My grandmother's kitchen, sir," I replied, the memory of her warm, flour-dusted hands bringing a lump to my throat. "And now I have my own little shop, Ellie's Sweet Corner on Maple Street." Throughout the reception, I hovered discreetly, watching from a distance as guests flocked to the dessert table. They murmured compliments, their faces lighting up with each bite. I saw them asking the servers, their gestures indicating a desire to know more about the baker. It was an exhilarating experience, a validation that resonated deeper than any words of praise from Chloe or Julian ever could. As the evening wound down and I began the process of carefully packing up my remaining tools in empty boxes, Mr. Hawthorne approached me again. He handed me an envelope. "This is for your exceptional service, Ellie," he said, his smile genuine. "A small bonus." I opened it and gasped. It was far more than I had expected. Then his voice softened and his gaze held mine. "Ellie," he began, a curious warmth in his eyes, "I was wondering if you might be free for coffee sometime next week. I'd love to hear more about your grandmother's kitchen and perhaps discuss some future collaborations." My heart did something strange, a little flutter I hadn't felt in decades. A coffee with Richard Hawthorne? I'd like that very much, Mr. Hawthorne," I said, a genuine, joyful smile finally breaking through. "I'd like that very much." The call came on Tuesday, just as Richard had promised. His voice, deep and warm, made my stomach do a peculiar flip, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years, perhaps decades. He suggested coffee at Cafe Luna, a charming, elegant spot in the city center, for Thursday afternoon. I accepted, my voice a little breathless, and then spent the next 48 hours in a delightful flutter of anticipation. On Thursday, I meticulously chose my outfit. A simple navy dress, well-tailored and modest, paired with the delicate pearl earrings my grandmother had worn on her own wedding day. I wanted to look respectable, put together, but most importantly, I wanted to feel like myself. A faint flush touched my cheeks as I applied a touch of lipstick, a shade I hadn't worn since Arthur passed away. When I arrived at Cafe Luna, Richard was already waiting, standing as I approached the table. He pulled out my chair with old-fashioned courtesy, a gesture so rare these days that it made my heart skip. He looked even more distinguished than he had at the wedding, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled. Over steaming cups of rich coffee, we talked for what felt like mere minutes but turned out to be 2 glorious hours. Richard spoke openly about his life, revealing that he had been a widower for 8 years. He had built his investment company from the ground up, a self-made man who now, despite his travels and successes, often felt a profound loneliness. I found myself admitting my own quiet loneliness, the empty house, the long evenings after a day in the bakery, though I quickly added that my baking filled a significant void, giving me purpose. We discussed everything from my grandmother's cherished recipes and my burgeoning dreams for Ellie's Sweet Corner to our favorite classic novels. He had a dry wit that caught me off guard, making me laugh freely and deeply, a sound I realized I hadn't truly uttered in months. There was a genuine warmth and understanding that enveloped us, making the elegant cafe feel intimate and comfortable. As we prepared to leave, Richard extended another invitation. "Ellie," he said, his eyes twinkling, "would you do me the honor of having dinner with me this Saturday?" My heart did another joyful somersault. "I would love that, Richard," and I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. A genuine smile plastered across my face. It was exhilarating and a fresh, unexpected chapter unfolding before me. The next morning, I was at the bakery earlier than usual, humming a cheerful tune as I arranged a fresh batch of cranberry scones in the display case. The positive energy from my coffee date with Richard was still buzzing within me. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed with an angry jingle, and Chloe stormed in, her face flushed with fury, her eyes blazing. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Mom?" she practically shrieked. Making me jump, I stared at her, bewildered. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" "Brenda Jenkins saw you." She practically spit out the words, her voice dripping with accusation. "At Cafe Luna yesterday? With a man. What are you, a woman your age, doing chasing after men like some desperate—" "Enough!" I cut her off, my voice sharp, a surge of unexpected anger rising within me. I felt a new kind of fire, a protective instinct for this fragile, hopeful new connection. "How dare you speak to me that way, Chloe? Who I choose to have coffee with is none of your business." Chloe scoffed. "Oh, it is my business when you're making a spectacle of yourself. What do you know about this man? What if he's a charlatan, trying to take advantage of you?" "He's Richard Hawthorne," I stated, my voice firm, enjoying the way her face, previously a mask of outrage, contorted into a mixture of disbelief and dawning recognition. "The groom's father from the wedding I catered." The mention of the Hawthorne name instantly changed her demeanor. The anger in her eyes shifted, morphing into a calculated suspicion. "Richard Hawthorne?" she repeated, her tone less accusatory, more probing. "The Richard Hawthorne? The one from Hawthorne Investments?" She paused, her eyes narrowing. "Mom, what does he want with you? You think a man like that is genuinely interested in you? He probably just feels sorry for you, or he's got some other agenda." "Chloe, I think you should leave," I said, my voice dangerously low. The warmth I'd felt from Richard's company was being rapidly eroded by her cynical cruelty. "I'm just trying to protect you, Mom," she insisted, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "You're so naive. You'll get hurt." "Get out, Chloe," I said, my voice steady now, devoid of emotion, yet ringing with authority. "And don't come back." She stood there speechless for a moment, then turned on her heel and stormed out, the bell above the door once again chiming her angry exit. I stood amidst my fragrant scones, trembling, but also, surprisingly, feeling a strange sense of empowerment. Saturday evening, Richard took me to a quiet, charming Italian restaurant, its walls adorned with rustic paintings and the air filled with the aroma of garlic and herbs. The owner greeted him by name, escorting us to a secluded booth. Over plates of delicious pasta and rich red wine, Richard shared intimate stories about his late wife, not with sorrow, but with a gentle reverence. painting a picture of a loving, vibrant woman. He looked at me with an earnestness that made my heart ache in a pleasant way, a connection deepening with every shared word. Later, as he pulled up to my quiet street, his luxury sedan, a stark contrast to my modest home, we both saw Julian's truck parked 2 houses down. A familiar knot of dread tightened in my stomach. "Thank you, Richard," I said, turning to him, wanting to savor this moment, to ignore the lurking shadows. It was a wonderful evening. He smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "The pleasure was all mine, Ellie. I'll call you." He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my cheek, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down my spine. As soon as his car pulled away and turned the corner, Julian emerged from the shadows, his arms crossed, a sneer on his face. "So," he began, his voice dripping with malice, "playing the lonely widow, we. Pretty pathetic, Ellie. Richard Hawthorne? He's just slumming it. Men like that, they use women like you for entertainment. A bit of novelty, then they discard them. Don't think for a second he sees you as anything more." A few weeks later, on a bright Sunday afternoon, Richard invited me to his home. More specifically, he invited me to his garden, a breathtaking masterpiece that truly reflected the love and passion of his late wife, Margaret. Roses in every imaginable shade climbed elegantly manicured trellises, their delicate petals unfurling in fragrant beauty. Pathways were lined with fragrant lavender and rosemary, leading to secluded benches and ornate fountains. It was a place of profound peace and serene beauty, a living testament to Margaret's spirit. Margaret believed that gardens, much like relationships, Richard mused, his voice soft as we strolled hand in hand, required patience, attention, and the unwavering faith that something beautiful would ultimately grow. He paused, gazing at a vibrant cluster of hydrangeas, a gentle smile on his face. "It's been 8 years since she passed, Ellie. I believe she would want me to be happy now." My heart, which had been gently swaying with the rhythm of our walk, skipped a beat. I braced myself, a familiar apprehension creeping in, a cold reminder of Julian's cynical predictions. Was this the moment? Was he about to tell me that I was a lovely diversion, but nothing more? That it was time for me to return to my small life, to my struggling bakery? Richard turned to me, his hand tightening slightly around mine. His gaze was earnest, direct, but there was no pity, no condescension. Instead, his eyes held a glimmer of something I couldn't quite decipher. "Ellie," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about your bakery, and about your extraordinary talent." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "I want to invest in your business." I was stunned. The words hung in the air, foreign and unexpected. "Invest?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. "Why would you want to invest in my little shop, Richard?" The thought was so far-fetched, so beyond my modest imaginings, that it seemed almost absurd. He smiled, a reassuring, confident smile that eased some of my immediate shock. "Ellie, I've spent 40 years in business, and I've learned to recognize potential when I see it. Your talent, your passion, they are rare. Your desserts are not just food, they are art. They deserve a much wider audience than a single small shop on Maple Street." He led me to a carved stone bench beneath a weeping willow, gesturing for us to sit. "I'm proposing a partnership," he continued, his voice calm and persuasive. "My capital for expansion, your creativity and expertise. We can build a real brand, Ellie, multiple locations, perhaps even a patisserie line distributed to high-end grocery stores. We could turn Ellie's Sweet Corner into something truly remarkable." My mind reeled. Multiple locations? A brand? It was a dream so vast, so audacious, it felt almost impossible to grasp. "But Richard," I stammered, I know nothing about running multiple businesses. I'm just a baker, a school secretary who finally opened her dream shop." He chuckled softly, reaching out to gently squeeze my hand. "That's precisely where I come in. You would focus on what you do best, creating exquisite desserts, developing new recipes, maintaining quality. I would handle the business expansion, the logistics, the managers who would oversee the day-to-day operations. You would be the creative heart of the enterprise." The thought was intoxicating. A chance to prove my worth, not just to myself, but to Chloe and Julian, to show them that my dream wasn't sad or embarrassing, but a path to real, tangible success. The desire to show them was a powerful motivator, a quiet fire burning in my belly. But why me, Richard? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, needing to understand the deeper motive behind such a grand gesture. Why would you do this for me? His gaze softened, his eyes locking with mine, revealing a vulnerability that touched me deeply. He took a deep breath. Because I believe in you, Ellie. More than that. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I want to see you succeed, in every way possible. Tears stung my eyes, hot and unexpected. The sheer tenderness of his confession, the audacity of his belief in me, overwhelmed me. My voice thick with emotion, I whispered back, I'm falling in love with you too, Richard. He leaned in then, gently, his lips soft against mine. It was a kiss that held both promise and comfort, a tender exploration that made me feel like a young woman again, filled with boundless hope and exhilarating joy. In that moment, surrounded by Margaret's beautiful garden, I felt a future unfurling before me, one I hadn't dared to imagine. Later that evening, I floated through my house, a radiant smile fixed on my face. The scent of Richard's cologne still lingered faintly on my navy dress. My mind replayed his words, the declarations of love interwoven with the bold proposal of a business partnership. The sheer happiness was almost overwhelming, a cascade of joy that washed away years of quiet resignation. My phone rang, startling me out of my blissful reverie. I glanced at the caller ID. It was Chloe. My smile faltered slightly, a premonition of unease settling in my stomach. I answered, trying to maintain my newfound lightness. Mom, Chloe's voice cut through the air, devoid of warmth, laced with an undeniable edge. I need to come over. Now. The grim tone in her voice set an immediate, unwelcome chill, hinting that the happiness I felt was about to be challenged, perhaps even shattered. If you're as stunned as I was by what happened next, you'll want to keep watching. This story took a turn I never saw coming. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to follow my journey. The moment Chloe's call ended, a cold dread settled in my stomach, chilling the lingering warmth from Richard's kiss. Her ominous tone had been unmistakable, a dark cloud gathering over the bright horizon of my happiness. I tried to dismiss it, to hold on to the exhilaration of Richard's proposal and his declaration of love. But the knot of anxiety tightened with every passing minute. Sure enough, a mere 15 minutes later, my doorbell rang with an impatient jab. I opened it to find Chloe and Julian standing on my porch, their faces grim, their expressions a stark contrast to the glow I still felt. They looked less like concerned family and more like a jury arriving to pass judgment. We need to talk, Chloe declared, brushing past me into the living room without an invitation. Julian followed, his presence filling the space with an almost suffocating tension. They didn't even bother to sit down, standing pointedly in front of me as if ready for an interrogation. Mom, Chloe began, her voice tight. Brenda Jenkins called me. She saw you at Richard Hawthorne's house. Said she overheard you two talking about business deals and investments and partnerships. What in the world is going on? My heart sank. Brenda Jenkins, the town's most notorious gossip, had struck again. My fleeting moment of private joy, of a beautiful whispered secret, was already exposed, picked apart, and weaponized. This wasn't just about concern. This was about control, about tearing down anything that threatened their narrative of my life. I realized with a heavy heart that my happiness was about to be sabotaged. Yet again. Julian snorted, his expression one of utter disdain. He's playing you, Ellie. Rich men like Hawthorne don't just invest in small-time operations run by women like you without an ulterior motive. You're naive if you think otherwise. His words were a direct assault not just on Richard, but on my intelligence, on my very worth. Chloe chimed in, reinforcing his point. Exactly, Mom. Your baking is a hobby, not a talent that warrants a major investment. You're good, sure, but it's not like you're some Michelin star chef. The familiar sting of invalidation, the constant dismissal of my passion, echoed in her words, dragging me back to the humiliation of my opening day. A flicker of the defiance I'd felt after our last confrontation ignited within me. My baking got me that wedding reception, Chloe, I retorted, my voice trembling slightly but firm. It was good enough to impress the Hawthorne family, good enough to catch Richard's attention. He sees value in what I do. Julian, who had been pacing impatiently, slammed his hand down on the coffee table, making me jump. Value, he practically shouted, his face reddening. Ellie, wake up! Rich men don't fall in love with 62-year-old bakers. It just doesn't happen. His words hit me like a physical blow, directly refuting Richard's heartfelt confession, aiming straight for the tender new hope blossoming in my heart. The thought that he might be right, that I was foolish to believe in such a thing, was terrifying. Chloe, sensing the effectiveness of Julian's aggressive approach, shifted her tactics, adopting a softer, more manipulative tone. She sat down next to me, placing a hand on my arm, though her eyes remained cold. Mom, she said, her voice laced with a feigned concern, I know you're lonely. I know you miss Dad, and I know you're looking for something to fill that void. But this whole fantasy with Richard, it's going to destroy you. My eyes welled up. The mention of Arthur always struck a chord, but her words felt like a cruel twisting of my grief, using it against me. What if it's not a fantasy, Chloe? I pleaded, my voice barely a whisper, a desperate plea for her to see, to understand. What if someone actually sees value in me? What if I deserve this happiness? Her composure snapped. She pulled her hand away, standing abruptly, her voice rising in a furious crescendo. Because we know you, Mom. We know who you really are. You're not some successful businesswoman with a bright future. You're a widow who can't accept that her time is over. The cruelty of her words stunned me into silence. My own daughter, delivering such a brutal, final judgment on my life. Before I could even begin to process the depth of that wound, she pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. See for yourself, she said, thrusting the phone into my trembling hands. The screen displayed a series of articles, their headlines chillingly similar. Hawthorne Investments, The Silent Takeover. Richard Hawthorne's Predatory Business Practices. When Philanthropy Hides Exploitation. My vision blurred as I skimmed through them, each article detailing a chilling pattern. Richard Hawthorne, the charming, distinguished man who had stolen my heart, was allegedly known for investing in small businesses, specifically those owned by older, often recently widowed women. Julian leaned over, his finger pointing to a particular paragraph. He targets lonely widows with small businesses, he explained, his voice low and sinister. Gets them to sign agreements, offers, partnerships that slowly but surely give him control. Before they know it, they've lost everything, their business, their savings, their dignity. My breath caught in my throat. I saw images of a woman who lost her vineyard, another who lost her boutique hotel, their faces etched with despair. My carefully constructed fairy tale, the beautiful future Richard and I had envisioned, crumbled into dust around me. The declarations of love, the promises of partnership, now echoed with a sinister, hollow ring. Was this all a calculated ploy? Was I just another unsuspecting target? Mom, Chloe urged, her voice now softer, almost victorious. You need to end this. You need to close the bakery before he takes everything from you, like he has with all those other women. Julian nodded in agreement, his eyes holding a look of grim satisfaction. They left soon after, convinced they had saved me from myself. I remained rooted to the spot, the phone still clutched in my hand, the damning articles searing themselves into my memory. The image of Richard's kind eyes, the feel of his gentle kiss, warred with the chilling narratives on the screen. My gaze fell upon his business card, still resting on my coffee table, a stark reminder of the man who had offered me so much, yet now seemed to threaten to take it all away. Was he a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing? Had my heart, so desperate for a connection, led me to the biggest mistake of my life? The night after Chloe and Julian's ambush was a torment of sleepless hours. My mind raced, trapped in a relentless loop of Chloe's accusations, Julian's cruel pronouncements, and the damning headlines on the articles I'd seen. The vibrant joy I'd felt just hours before had curdled into a bitter confusion, leaving me feeling hollowed out and utterly disoriented. Had I been so blind, so foolish, to believe in a man who seemed too good to be true? Was Richard truly a predator, charming lonely women only to strip them of their assets? The next morning, as I mechanically prepared a small batch of scones, my phone rang. It was Richard. His warm, familiar voice, usually a source of comfort, now made my throat tighten with a knot of suspicion. He was calling to suggest lunch, eager to discuss the details of our proposed business expansion. I imagined his charming smile, the twinkle in his eyes, and a wave of nausea washed over me. "Richard," I managed, my voice strained. I, I can't do lunch today. I need some time. Things have come up." There was a brief pause on the other end, then his voice, gentle and understanding. "Of course, Ellie. Take all the time you need. Just know that whatever is on your mind, my feelings for you are not contingent on any business deal. I mean what I said." His words were reassuring, yet the seeds of doubt Chloe had planted were so deeply rooted, I found it hard to believe him. Later that afternoon, a woman walked into Ellie's sweet corner. She was elegantly dressed, with intelligent, kind eyes, and she looked vaguely familiar, perhaps from one of the article photos. My stomach clenched. "Ellie Vance?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. "My name is Lisa Olson. I think we need to talk." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. One of the victims. She was here to confirm Julian's warnings, to expose Richard's deceit. I braced myself for the inevitable. "It's about Richard Hawthorne, isn't it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, resigned. Lisa nodded, her expression compassionate. "Yes, I know Chloe and Julian have been talking to you." She sat down at one of my small tables, and I joined her, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "Richard invested in my catering company a few years ago, and eventually he did acquire it." My heart sank further. It was true. All of it. "However," Lisa continued, her eyes meeting mine, "there's something you need to understand. Chloe Vance Sterling approached me a couple of days ago. She offered me $5,000 to come here and tell you a story designed to convince you that Richard was a ruthless predator, that he would take everything from you, just like he supposedly did from me." My mind reeled. $5,000? My head swam with a sudden rush of disbelief and outrage. The evidence, the damning articles, the desperate women. Was it all fabricated? "Chloe paid you?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. Lisa nodded, reaching into her handbag. She pulled out a thick envelope and placed it on the table between us. "Yes, here's the cash. She specifically asked me to paint Richard as someone who preys on lonely, older women, to say he used charm to get control of my business, then left me with nothing." She paused, her gaze steady. "But that's not the truth, Ellie. My catering business was in deep financial trouble. I was drowning in debt. Richard Hawthorne legitimately wound invested in my company, and when I couldn't turn it around, he offered to buy it out at a more than fair price. He saved me from bankruptcy. He was nothing but honorable." She pushed the envelope toward me. "I'm telling you this because I understand family manipulation. I've seen it before, and I couldn't live with myself if I let them destroy your chance at happiness or your business with lies." Lisa stood up, her mission accomplished. "Think carefully, Ellie, and good luck." With that, she left, leaving the envelope in a whirlwind of emotions in her wake. I stared at the envelope, Chloe's blood money, feeling a cold fury begin to simmer beneath the surface. Betrayal, sharp and potent, pierced through my initial confusion. How could my own daughter do something so monstrous? Barely minutes after Lisa's departure, my phone rang again. It was Chloe. I answered, my voice deceptively calm. "Chloe," I said, "I think we need to talk." "Mom," she began, her tone defensive, "I hope you've thought about what Julian and I said. We're just trying to protect you. You're so vulnerable right now. Getting involved with a man like that—" "Lisa Olson was just here," I interrupted, cutting her off cleanly. A hard silence descended on the line. "She told me about the $5,000 you paid her to lie." The silence stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by my own ragged breathing. Then Chloe's voice, now small, almost childlike, but still tinged with a desperate defensiveness. "Mom, I had to. You wouldn't listen to reason. You were so desperate for attention, you were just throwing yourself at him. We were trying to save you. Save me? I asked, my voice rising, my pain and anger finally breaking through. Save me from what? Happiness? Success? Why, Chloe? Why do you need me to be a failure so badly? The dam broke. Chloe started to, her voice choked with tears. Because if you succeed, then what does that say about me? What does it say about Julian? Her confession hung in the air, raw and devastating. Chloe, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. What are you talking about? Between ragged sobs, she confessed. Their perfect life was a facade. Julian's business was failing, drowning in debt. They owed nearly $50,000. Their grand plan had been for me to sell my house, the house Arthur and I had built together, to help them out, to keep their carefully constructed world from crumbling. My bakery, my dreams, my potential relationship, they were all inconvenient obstacles to their selfish agenda. The disgust that washed over me was overwhelming. This wasn't protection. It was manipulation, rooted in their own financial desperation and deep-seated insecurities. My own daughter and son-in-law had actively conspired to sabotage my happiness, to destroy my reputation, and to use my grief for their own gain. The choice was stark, painful, but clear. Chloe, I said, my voice firm, I'm done. Done with your lies, done with your manipulations. Don't call me again and tell Julian the same. I hung up before she could respond, my hand trembling, but my resolve solidified. Immediately, I dialed Richard's number. My heart was pounding, but this time it was with certainty, with a fierce determination. Richard, I said, my voice thick with emotion, I need to tell you everything, and then I want to accept your offer. Every last part of it. 1 year later, almost to the day, I stood in the flagship location of Ellie's Sweet Corner in downtown Charleston. It was a far cry from the tiny, quiet shop on Maple Street. This was a bustling, elegant establishment, its display cases gleaming with artisanal pastries, its air thick with the irresistible aroma of gourmet coffee and freshly baked delights. Customers, a diverse and enthusiastic crowd, lined up out the door, eager for a taste of my now famous creations. My dream, once a solitary whisper, had blossomed into an empire. We had multiple locations thriving, with plans for a total of 7 across 3 states by the end of the year, and even tentative discussions for international expansion. My personal life had blossomed just as beautifully. I now lived in a grand colonial house, filled with light and laughter, beside Richard, my husband of 6 months. Our wedding had been a small, intimate ceremony in his exquisite garden, a place that held so much meaning for us both. No family from my side had attended, a decision I had made with a heavy heart, but one I knew was necessary for my peace. I found Richard in his study, surrounded by ledgers and blueprints, his mind sharp as ever, even at 69. He still considered his work passion projects, and our bakery empire was clearly his favorite. There was no sign of him slowing down, only an invigorated zeal for new challenges. There you are, my love, he said, looking up from his papers, his eyes twinkling. He patted his lap, and I sank onto it, feeling a warmth spread through me. He pulled me close, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. Do you remember, he mused, his voice soft, exactly a year ago, you were standing alone in your little shop, questioning your worth, wondering if you'd made the biggest mistake of your life. I leaned into his embrace, a contented sigh escaping my lips. I remember every moment, Richard. It feels like a lifetime ago. Just then, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was a text from Chloe. Another apology, another plea to talk. Richard noticed the notification and gave a knowing smile. Still trying? He murmured gently. I remembered the daughter who had seen my success as a threat, who had conspired to destroy my happiness out of her own insecurity and desperation. The pang of sadness was still there, a dull ache, but it was overshadowed by a quiet, unwavering resolve. I typed a quick reply. I wish you well, Chloe, but we have nothing to discuss. Then, with a firm press of my thumb, I blocked her number. It was a final, definitive severing, a declaration of my emotional independence. That evening, we celebrated the grand opening of our 5th location. The air was electric with excitement. As I stood on a small stage, holding the oversized scissors, cameras flashed, reporters scribbled in their notebooks, and applause erupted from the crowd. With a flourish, I cut the ribbon, officially opening another Ellie's Sweet Corner. I then announced the establishment of the Arthur Vance Scholarship Program for aspiring young bakers, a tribute to the man who had always encouraged my dreams, and a way to pay forward the opportunity I had been given. The sense of accomplishment was immeasurable. Driving home with Richard, the city lights a blur outside our window, I felt a profound sense of peace. "Do you have any regrets, Ellie?" Richard asked, his hand finding mine. I squeezed his hand, reflecting on the tumultuous journey of the past year. "Only one," I confided, looking out at the glittering cityscape. Waiting so long to believe in myself, letting other people's opinions matter more than my own dreams. He smiled, a gentle, understanding smile. "You were always the woman you had the potential to be, Mom. Ellie, I merely provided the opportunity. You did all the hard work." As we discussed plans for our next expansion, envisioning new cities and new horizons, my phone rang again. This time it was Brenda Jenkins, the town gossip. I almost didn't answer, but a strange curiosity compelled me. "Ellie, darling." Brenda's voice, a familiar mix of saccharine sweetness and thinly veiled glee, chirped through the receiver. "You won't believe what's happened. Chloe and Julian, they've lost their house, filed for bankruptcy, and Chloe's been telling everyone it's your fault that you abandoned them." A pang, sharp and unexpected, pierced through my heart. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. But the pang quickly subsided, replaced by a quiet strength. "Brenda," I said, my voice steady, "I am not responsible for the choices they made. They had their own dreams, their own plans. They chose a path that led them here." I thought of the advice Chloe had once given me, meant to crush my spirit. "And if Chloe is looking for guidance," I continued, a hint of steel in my tone, "she can figure it out herself, just like I did." I ended the call, leaving Brenda to process the uncharacteristic bluntness. Later, as I stood before the mirror, preparing for bed, I looked at my reflection. No longer a tired woman filled with doubt, but a confident, beloved, and successful woman. My eyes held a knowing glint. My smile was genuine and unburdened. I had chosen myself, my dreams, my happiness, over everyone else's expectations, over their manipulations, over their projections of failure. This, I realized, was the sweetest victory of all.